from our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. It has been 6 days since the horrific mass shooting at a nightclub in Birmingham's Five Points Entertainment District. But the fallout continues as police search for suspects. Families mourn the 4 people who were killed by gunfire. Doctors care for the 17 others who were injured in the shooting. And Alabama's largest city searches for answers in the wake of the tragedy. Here's what we know at the moment. As I mentioned, 4 people were killed and 17 injured by gunfire at Hush nightclub in Five Points. No suspects have been arrested or charged, at least not that the police have announced. Police believe the shooting was a targeted hit job, indicating gang violence. They also believe a trigger activator was used based on the high number of shell casings found at the scene. Sometimes called Glock switches, these devices attach to pistols and turn them into machine gun style weapons that rapidly spray bullets. Also, this is the 3rd mass shooting in Birmingham this year alone. Mayor Randall Woodfin said police are determined to bring the killers to justice.
I also want to acknowledge the toll of this, the heaviness of this for many, many people involved. One, for these victims, the victims who lived and who have to wake up and face a new unfortunate normal related to the emotional as well as physical trauma that they will have to live with. 2, to those who actually lost their lives, to their families. There are no words for that loss, right? Trying to stand here and find words to describe those families and what they're feeling right now, the anger, the hurt, the pain, the loss. There's a certain element in this city, there's a certain element in this community who are too comfortable riding around with semi-automatic weapons, automatic weapons, conversion switches, and everything else, whose only intent, hell-bent intent, is to harm people, shoot people, kill people. I am an elected official. My position is nonpartisan. And so in this moment, pretty much like all moments, I really don't care. I don't give a damn about partisan. I don't care about Democratic politics, Republican politics. What I care about and what is my concern, what is my top priority, along with the Birmingham Police Department, is public safety.
This incident, of course, has implications statewide. Governor Kay Ivey and Attorney General Steve Marshall said they are willing to set up a crime suppression unit combining resources from the state and federal governments to help out the understaffed Birmingham Police Department. A similar task force was set up here in Montgomery to fight violent crime in the capital city.
Like in Montgomery, we started a Montgomery area suppression crime unit, and it's paying off big time, and I'm prepared to help Mayor Woodfin start the same in Birmingham.
Governor, is there any discussion about state takeover potentially of the Birmingham Police Department, this being the 3rd mass shooting this year?
Not that I'm aware of.
Also, legislation outlawing those Glock switch devices had already been filed for the 3rd straight year. I'll talk with State Representative Philip Ensler about his bill later in the show. It has been a pretty dramatic several days on the education front here in the capital city. Earlier this month, Montgomery Public Schools Superintendent Dr. Melvin Brown shocked the education community by announcing his resignation from office, which the Board of Education voted to accept. His decision came after months of internal bickering with the select members of the board, which Brown said devolved into personal attacks against his character and his family. In a video statement, Brown said it was a difficult decision to step aside given the progress the city has made, but that the working environment made it impossible to continue.
During my tenure, we made great strides to improve upon historical neglect in MPS, including significant outcomes educationally for our students. After heavy prayer and thought, my decision to tender my resignation to the board was not something that I took lightly. However, there were obstacles in place that hindered me from effectively executing my responsibilities. Disparaging remarks and ongoing false accusations were stated not only about me and my role as superintendent, but also personally regarding my family. As a public servant in leadership, I understand that there will be critiques and challenges about the decisions I make, and I accept that. However, I would never have imagined that defamatory assertions and false claims about my personal and professional life would overshadow the work that we were trying to do in the district. These attacks have insinuated that I have sought, quote, personal and family favors. The constant interference in the day-to-day operations of the district adversely impacted my ability to execute my responsibilities and played a significant role in my decision to resign.
This shakeup in the capital city for one of the state's largest school systems has the entire education community concerned. The Alabama Education Association this week specifically called on Montgomery Board of Education member Lisa Keith to retract and disavow attacks she made toward Brown, calling her actions, quote, incongruous and offensive. And this week, the Montgomery Chamber of Commerce held an emergency press conference urging Brown to reconsider his decision and calling for the state to again take over the Montgomery public school system.
These four members of the Board of Education last week told elected and business leaders that we have no business and they're in their business. Today we say to the Montgomery Board of Education, the business of education is indeed everyone's business, and we stand ready to assist in finding solutions to the current leadership crisis. Be it further resolved that this United Montgomery Leadership Delegation calls upon State of Alabama Superintendent of Education Dr. Eric Mackey and the State of Alabama Department of Education and Board to place MPS under state control and intervention. Until such time, the local board demonstrates that a majority of leadership will make the needed changes to move Montgomery forward in a true spirit of partnership.
Dr. Melvin Brown's done a great job. He has moved us forward. He's begun to implement some changes, some personnel changes, some curriculum changes, some scheduling changes that are really propelling Montgomery forward. Financially, Montgomery was essentially bankrupt when the state intervention started. Just a few years later, we had turned that around. But again, and this community had invested for the first time in more than 40 years in a new property tax. But I think that we're going to have a hard time maintaining the academic momentum. We're going to have a hard time maintaining also the momentum behind the new tax and behind the investment in this community without stable leadership. We're following this very closely. We appreciate the resolution today. I really can't react to the resolution too much without taking that back to our legal team so they can look at what methods are available to us. But I will promise this community, as a Montgomery County resident myself and a member of this chamber, that we are going to be deeply involved to try to turn this around, to make sure that Montgomery returns to stable leadership and does not lose the momentum that has been built over the last several years.
Some more positive news on the education front. Governor Kay Ivey this week visited a new public charter school in Prattville that focuses on classical education. It's the first of its kind in Alabama, offering families a schooling option usually only found at private schools. Capitol Journal's Jeff Sanders has that story.
Governor Kay Ivey returned to her roots as a school teacher, reading a Dr. Seuss book to a classroom full of students at Ivy Classical Academy in Elmore County.
You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose.
The governor's visit to the newly opened charter school was part of her back-to-school tour around Alabama.
Here you're learning about things like respect, honesty, and kindness. These are values that will guide you throughout your entire life, no matter what you choose to do.
Ivy Classical Academy is Alabama's first charter school with a focus on classical education.
We want to train the mind, so we want our students to be smarter, we want them to know a lot of things, but we also, and perhaps more importantly, want to improve their hearts, which means that we want them to be virtuous, thoughtful people. So we focus on kindness and politeness and what it means to be a citizen.
David Whitton is the head of school for more than 600 K through 5th grade students in Ivy's inaugural year.
until now, if you wanted a classical education for your children in Alabama, the only way to do it was to send them to a private school or maybe to homeschool them. And so us having what is the first and a rather large classical charter school and receiving attention from our state leadership is important, because we want to continue to hopefully expand and to offer a classical education to children throughout Alabama.
Founder Bradley Neve began the long journey to create the school several years ago. Despite some controversy over using public funds, he believes charter schools like Ivy can be a model for the future of education.
We chose to start this school. We didn't know it was going to take 5 years. We didn't know it was going to be the gravel road. We didn't know it was going to be so long and grueling. But we started this for our two boys. But I want everybody in this room to know that we finished it for every student in this room.
Ivy Classical plans to add a new grade level each year. While students from Elmore County get top priority, applications are open to students from across the state. Reporting for Capital Journal, I'm Jeff Sanders.
On the latest episode of Spotlight on Education that aired this week, I spoke with Emily Schultz of Alabama Families for Great Schools about the state of charter schools in Alabama. You can check out that conversation on our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search Capital Journal and hit that subscribe button while you're there. Well, Alabama dodged the brunt of Hurricane Helene this week, but the massive amounts of rain and traffic from evacuees made for some challenges for Alabama state troopers. Knowing that hurricane season isn't over, it was a test run for what could come with the next storm. Capital Journal's Randy Scott reports.
Citizens love to travel, and hitting the open road is a popular method for many. Recently, we marked the end of summer with Labor Day. For some law enforcement agencies, that meant a busy stretch of work while many people traveled.
Labor Day, again, anytime we lose a life is tragic, but we had 6 fatal crashes, or 6 crashes that resulted in lives lost during Labor Day, and then we had 1 drowning. So overall, we've actually seen a decrease in fatal crashes.
Lieutenant Jeremy Burkett says Aaliyah's patrol division put in a lot of work to keep people safe this holiday travel season.
We kind of analyze the traffic patterns, kind of look and see where we saw issues, where we had crashes, and then we develop enforcement plans in a proactive way to kind of reduce that. So we've seen that be successful.
Their work doesn't end with this season. It extends into hurricane season.
Storm's path can change. You know, there's a lot that can go one way or the other. It's hard to predict, but for us, we can't not be prepared.
Many people know Aaliyah and this state trooper division for monitoring traffic in all 67 Alabama counties. It's part of their duties for promoting public safety. But did you know they also monitor the weather too? And with it being hurricane season, they're very busy.
We work with the Alabama Department of Transportation on an annual basis. It may be something like contraflow, where, hey, something hits in Mobile or Baldwin County and we've got to one-way the interstate, or we've got to change roadway patterns.
Their objective is to promote public safety by keeping people safe.
Whether it be local EMA or state EMA, we've got plans in place. National Guard, they're another organization that we really work in concert with as relates to storm and disaster relief.
In Montgomery, Randy Scott, Capital Journal.
Turning briefly to Washington, you may remember we previewed the end of fiscal year spending deadline with Stephen Boyd last week. This week, Congress avoided a government shutdown by passing a stopgap continuing resolution. The measure keeps the government funded until December 20th, when Congress will do all this over again. It also adds an additional $231 million for the Secret Service in the wake of recent assassination attempts. In terms of the vote, the Alabama delegation was split on the bill. Representatives Robert Adderholt, Mike Rogers, Jerry Carl, Terry Sewell, and Dale Strong all voted yes, while Representatives Gary Palmer and Barry Moore and Senators Tommy Tuberville and Katie Britt voted no. Coming up after the break, I'll talk with State Representative Philip Ensler about that Glock switch bill. After that, Senators April Weaver, Lance Bell, Chris Elliott, and Wes Kitchens are all in studio to talk about their recent trip to the southern border and what they learned. And later in the show, Dothan Mayor Mark Saliba and Fairhope Mayor Sherry Sullivan are here to discuss the new Live Local Alabama campaign from the League of Municipalities. Stay with us.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is State Representative Philip Ensler from here in Montgomery. State Representative, thanks for coming on the show.
Of course, always good to be here.
Yeah, well, it's under less than ideal circumstances. We're talking about the shooting that happened in Birmingham this past weekend. Tragic all the way around, but it also reminds us of your bill that would ban the Glock switches, I guess the sale and use of Glock switches, these devices that can be attached to a weapon to basically turn it into a machine gun. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, and to just begin, it is horrible what happened. My heart and prayers go out to the families, the victims, everyone impacted. And it's important that we remember that this is not just some Democratic issue, Republican issue. It really is a human issue. But all that to say that, right, the bill that I've now filed for the third year in a row, what it does is ban the conversion of pistols into machine guns. So what it says is that if there is a pistol that has a what's called a trigger activator or Glock switch, there are a few terms used that turn it into a machine gun, that would then be illegal on the state level here in Alabama.
Right, and it's already illegal on the federal level, correct?
It is already illegal, and I know we'll get into it, but it's really important that we give our district attorneys in Alabama a tool that they can use. Right now, if police, sheriffs, law enforcement in Alabama, if they find one of these devices, the best they can do is turn it over to the federal government for U.S. attorneys to prosecute, and that's all well and good, but we want to make sure that our elected district attorneys everywhere in the state have a tool in the toolbox that they can use.
Well, yeah, it's not like we have a ton of federal agents running around the streets, enforcing gun laws. There's a reason why you have federal law and state law and local and everything. So I totally understand that. So go ahead.
And I'll just quickly add in, law enforcement throughout the state, especially in larger cities, they're finding more and more of these devices. So at one point in time, the federal government was sufficient to turn it over and have them handle it. But the caseload now has grown so much that we need to be able to expand who's able to prosecute them.
I see. Well, and based on all the reports, we'll wait for the forensics, but the initial reports out of Birmingham were that there are indications a Glock switch or trigger activator was used just based on the sheer number of shell casings they found. 4 people killed, 17 injured, that's a lot of collateral damage on a shooting. So that's the danger of these things, right? Because instead of getting off one shot, I don't know how exactly the timing works, you're spraying bullets just like a machine gun.
Right, and within a handful of seconds, dozens and dozens of bullets can be sprayed. And this is why the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, the Fraternal Order of Police, the district attorneys, the sheriffs, all of these statewide entities that represent law enforcement, that represent prosecutors, they want this bill because it is a public safety issue. Again, this is not about controlling guns. It's not about the Second Amendment in any way. Of course, there's that Second Amendment right to bear arms. What we're saying is we want to empower law enforcement in our state. We want to support them even more as they try to make our communities even safer. And all that to say that and I know that you know this. I pre-filed this bill before the Birmingham shooting. I filed it before the Dadeville shooting. And the reason for that is that I've heard from law enforcement right here in Montgomery throughout the state that they want this. So this is not just some knee-jerk reaction. It's not just trying to say we're doing something. This is truly an effort to enhance public safety. And the last thing I'll say on that note is that this is just one piece of a large puzzle. I know that this is not going to stop every shooting. I know it's not going to stop every bad act, but it can deter some use, and it can then hold accountable when there are some of these horrible situations.
Well, and perhaps turning a relatively isolated shooting into a mass event when you're spraying bullets. But let me ask you, though. You brought up the Second Amendment, because there are plenty of those, conservatives mostly, who probably don't have they don't like Glock switches, or they don't want these, altered weapons and things like that. But they will resist any kind of restriction on guns, including something like this, because of a feeling that, look, any kind of restriction on firearms is an erosion of the Second Amendment. I mean, some real heartfelt views like that. So how do you respond to those, including many of your colleagues who might feel that way?
Yeah, a great point. We absolutely have to uphold every constitutional right, including the right to bear arms. This, though, does not at all erode that right. People still have a right to a pistol. They still have a right to bear arms. What we're saying is when it then becomes a machine gun, when it becomes something that is so lethal and so dangerous, at that point that you no longer have a right to bear that. And we impose reasonable rules all the time on every constitutional right, whether it's free speech, whether it's voting rights. We say, as a society, there's certain parameters, there's certain things that we need to do. So I have no interest in any way in infringing on the right. We have to protect that right. What I want to do is make sure that our law enforcement, that we're doing something that's in the interest of public safety. And I'll just add on that this bill is very narrowly focused. It doesn't deal with any sort of other guns or weapons or devices. Anything else is a separate bill that others have. This is purely focused on Glock switches and making sure that we empower our prosecutors. And for anyone who may say, well, they want to be able to have it because if the bad guys have it, they want a Glock switch as well. Anyone who has seen or used a Glock switch knows that you can't really protect yourself with it, because once you pull the trigger on it, the bullets spray everywhere, as you mentioned, so you can end up harming people around you. If you're trying to protect yourself, you can end up harming your family, your friends, people that are within your vicinity. So it's not in any way infringing on people's right to have arms where they can protect themselves and protect their families.
Incredibly hard to aim. I mean, we saw that last week with I guess it was like an ATF agent that was using, and he still couldn't control it. And he's a professional. So I found that interesting. The other thing I hear from skeptics is, look, you can ban these things all day long. It's not going to stop crime. So why are we even talking about it? So how do you respond to those critics who say, look, this is not going to solve Birmingham. It's not going to solve Dadeville. We need other change, and for that reason, they don't really want to support the bill.
Yeah, great question. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's going to solve it. It's not going to stop every horrible situation. But we pass laws all the time here at the legislature to have state-level offenses, to make something a crime, knowing that some people will be deterred. Some people will say, hey, now that it is a crime in Alabama, I'm not going to commit it. But then to the extent that people do break the law, we want to be able to hold them accountable. There have to be consequences. So under that reasoning or under that logic, we wouldn't have any criminal laws or anything that makes something a crime. Look, we have speed limits. People are still going to speed. We have stop signs. People are still going to go through the stop sign, but it deters some of the bad behavior. But then if people do violate that law, then there's a consequence. So that's part of it. But look, I certainly believe that it starts at home. It starts with individuals. There's a role to play in having a strong moral foundation. It involves the community and mentorship and having programs that try to steer people, especially young people, away from violence. But then here at the legislature, we were elected to take actions, to be here to enact laws. So to the extent there is something reasonable, we're just doing our small part in part of a big picture.
We're almost out of time, but let me just ask you, you filed this bill, you said the third time in a row, passed the House last year, right? But I guess ran into trouble in the Senate. What are the prospects this year? I mean, talking with colleagues, do you think there might be some more momentum behind it this year?
Yeah, so this year I'm really grateful, really glad to have co-sponsors, Representatives Treadway, Bedsell, and Reynolds on the House side, and Representatives Hendricks. So all that have law enforcement backgrounds.
All law enforcement.
But also, 3 of those 4 are Republicans. So it has strong bipartisan support to begin with, which is really, really important. And on the Senate side, I'm really hopeful that we get it through. And I think with all the backing of these law enforcement agencies, this is an opportunity for those who back the blue, who support law enforcement, who care about public safety, to take a vote that's in favor of public safety. In no way do we want people to take a vote that's against what they believe. This is just simply saying they care about public safety. So I'm hopeful and optimistic this year we'll get it through.
We'll be watching, and all indications point to next session crime and criminal justice really being a big focus. I expect this to be right in there. We're out of time, but thanks again for coming on the show.
Yep, thank you as always.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. You're watching Alabama Public Television. Broaden your horizons.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next are members of the Alabama Senate, Senators April Weaver, Lance Bell, Chris Elliott, and Wes Kitchens. We almost have a quorum here. I don't think I've interviewed so many lawmakers at one time, but there's a reason for it. Y'all have just returned, I guess about a week ago, from the U.S. border with Mexico. Obviously, tons of problems with the border. I know y'all witnessed a lot. Mary Sell wrote a story about it. There have been several stories. Let me ask you, because Senator Bell, I know you had been before, and we had talked about this. So this is kind of a follow-up trip. What led to this trip, and you bring your colleagues along?
This is the Federation of American Immigration Reform. They put it on every year. It's things you find out about on the first trip, and then stay in kind of contact with some emails. But this built on the last trip, and this was for legislators and sheriffs. So I think it's very important for as many of our people from Alabama that can be involved to go and learn really more than what we learned last time. And I think it made a difference and opened more eyes to what's going on at the border.
Was it your first trip?
It was my first trip.
What did you see?
And so, like Lance said, it certainly opened my eyes. The things that I saw were, I guess I would describe them as not only eye-opening, but shocking. And it was a very, very educational trip to go and to actually see what's happening there on the border and at places that are not a point of entry, but where illegals are crossing. That was very eye-opening as well, and to hear it from the standpoint of dealing with our law enforcement partners, it was just very educational.
Mm-hmm. Would you agree?
I would, and I'll echo something Senator Weaver said, which was being there with our law enforcement partners at the same time to talk about what issues they're seeing and facing, and then to talk to our colleagues across the country about measures that they've taken at the state level to try to stem illegal immigration in their particular state. So much more than a photo op, this was an educational trip to try to learn from our colleagues around the country. What have you done that's been successful in making illegal immigrants want to go somewhere other than your state? And that's really what the takeaways are. In addition to really just figuring out the differences in the federal agencies, the alphabet soup of Border Patrol and Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Customs and Immigration Services. There's all these different steps and different agencies that handle these folks, and knowing how they work will help us attack this issue at the state level.
Mm-hmm. Senator Kitchens, I know y'all have faced some migrant issues over the years in your neck of the woods. Did some of that resonate as you saw the situation at the border?
It really did, and we had our sheriff there. We actually had both of our House members there, so our entire legislative delegation made the trip. We've seen an influx over the past 30 years, but more recently it's really been brought to light. But to really be able to work with colleagues, legislators from all around the country, I believe there were 20 states that were represented there, and sheriffs from all of those states, to really be able to share ideas. What's worked in your area and what can we bring back to Alabama and continue to build on?
Mm-hmm. Now, I know last year the legislature passed the fentanyl trafficking bill. This is something really has been a big focus of the legislature, and that's a big immigration problem, right? The drug trafficking that comes across the border. So I know that was passed, and I think it's one of the strictest in the country. So I think everybody's pleased with that. So what else do you think might need to build on top of that in terms of stemming immigration and really the problems that come along with it? I'll ask you first.
So we have looked at a number of different ways that we can address this problem. And again, having the dialogue with other states and other legislators and law enforcement from across the nation, it really helped us to kind of think about where are some areas that we can address. We're looking at several different things and working with the House members to try to think through where is it that we need to focus. Specifically the people that are here, not legally, they're working for cash. You know, how do we address maybe the wire transfers or things that specifically that they're dealing with, because they're you know, we're getting a little bit of sales tax from things that they buy, but they're in our schools, they're riding on our roads, our law enforcement is dealing with them. Where are those issues that we can address there as well? You know, certainly looking at helping our schools and how do we navigate some of those issues. And I know that some of them are working on some other things that they may want to touch on as well.
Yeah, please. I mean, Senator Bell, I know you've been involved in this issue for a while. You had that driver's license bill one time. So what are some other proposals you think might be legitimate and really impact the issue for Alabama rather than Texas?
One thing is when our law enforcement comes in contact with them and they put them in the jail, we know that immigration never comes and picks them up even if they are here illegal. So is getting a DNA swab from them, putting them in our DNA database, sharing that across all 50 states. And what that does when they come back under a different name and commit another crime, we can relate that. And that basically stemmed from an idea that they told us in Texas, but also Talladega County had that issue on a murder case that the same guy under a different name was wanted for murder in California, and through DNA they were able to trace him back. There's the same guy, different names, different everything, but in 2 different states, but the DNA tied him to being the same person.
Okay. So you think legislation could address that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this, because you mentioned crime. Obviously, we don't want any crimes to occur. We want to lock up everybody that is violent and committing crimes, whether they're an immigrant or not. But it strikes me that a lot of these folks are coming from Central America to the United States, Alabama, other states everywhere, really. A lot of them want to work. A lot of them are trying to, you know, come to a better life. So I'm curious if reform, you think it's possible. I know it's not a state issue; it's really more federal. You know, so many years after so many years of problems with the border, if there can be a breaking point, forcing Congress to actually fix the legal immigration problem, because there are jobs to be filled here. There should be a system of legal immigration, and would that maybe stem some of the problems that we're seeing at the border if there was a more cohesive, streamlined, common sense process to actually immigrate legally to the United States?
Well, clearly, I mean, this is the purview of the federal government by and large, and the federal government has got to fix this. And by federal government, I mean Congress has got to fix this. Unfortunately, what we have in absence of that is we have an administration that has issued wide-ranging executive orders that have let and expanded this parole program that's causing a lot of problems. And we see policies along the border, whether it's the wall or funding of Border Patrol or how we're handling those that are being interdicted, that has just really exacerbated the problem. And so we see, as Senator Weaver pointed out, these impacts, they hit us at home, right? They hit our schools, our hospitals, our roadways. And so, while Congress has absolutely got to act on this, and I hope that they do, and in a tough nature, we're not anti-immigration, far from it. We're anti-illegal immigration. And these folks need to come through the right way. There are programs to do that. There are methods to do that. An executive order is not one of them. And so our hope is to dissuade folks, and I'll speak for myself, is to dissuade folks from coming to Alabama until we can get a federal fix.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do remember 2011. That was after the Republican takeover of the legislature. And one of the very first things that happened was the immigration crackdown. It was part of the handshake. I was very much involved in all that. And it was celebrated as the toughest immigration law in the country. So much of that got peeled back, right, but by the courts, by the legislature itself. So how do you go about crafting some common sense policies that do help alleviate problems, do help crack down on criminals and things like that, without repeating what happened back in 2011 that ultimately proved to be unsuccessful?
So I think, speaking from someone who was here during that time, because I was in the House in 2010, what we want to do is really focus on things and do it the right way. We want to protect Alabama citizens. We want to protect our Alabama values. And seeing the things firsthand that specifically are, dealing with the human trafficking issues, the fentanyl issues, all the drug issues that are coming across the border, I think somebody said, every state is a border state now. And I truly believe that, just based on the things that we've seen. And so what we're doing is really focusing on some common sense solutions that we really think will address the problems.
Mm-hmm. I did find it interesting. I mean, I think the vice president who's running for president is at the border today. I think and that's pretty significant considering the campaign. It's always interesting that around campaign time, everybody wants to focus on the border, but not campaign time. For some reason, we find it tough to actually accomplish anything. Let me ask you this, Senator. You just mentioned, immigrant influxes tend to have, public. They cause a strain on public resources, schools, like you said, roads, public health systems, things like that. So it is a real, legitimate problem that affect communities. And yet, sometimes on the campaign trail, like we're seeing right now, the rhetoric gets a little overheated, talking about eating dogs and cats and things like that. So how do we address these problems? How do we really get to talk about these problems without it devolving into, really over-the-top, overheated rhetoric?
Well, I think one thing, you just look at things that we've seen in Albertville, and like I said, we've been dealing with this issue for 30 years or more, but it is a strain on our local schools. When we have an EL population that's around 60% in some of our schools, it's difficult for those students to learn, to go in and get the same quality education that we expect every student in Alabama to get. And then when you start bringing in different dialects and different languages on top of that, trying to find the resources to be able to fund additional EL teachers, not just Spanish speaking, but the Creole, the different dialects and all different languages. So we see it from a school standpoint, from a law enforcement standpoint. When you live in a more rural area and you have limited resources, limited law enforcement and first responders, a short amount of time when you have an influx of people, of any people, it's definitely going to put a strain on them. So, when we're really looking at those type things, I think that you see prime examples in Albertville. You talk about Athens, Silicaga. You're starting to name it all around the state that we've seen a large influx in a short amount of time.
What about Baldwin County? Y'all are growing, period, but has there been an influx there too?
We have, and specifically in central Baldwin County. We have seen a huge influx, of immigrants, but also of illegal immigrants, and talking with our law enforcement entities. But we're seeing schools that in the last probably 3 years have seen their English second language or English language learners or whatever we're calling it now, populations quadruple or more, and it puts a tremendous strain on those school systems. You go to an emergency room department and you see a lot of folks that aren't English speakers, and you have to wonder about status, how they got here, who's paying for this, and that's a lot of what we're focusing on. I want to go back, if I can, to the 2011 effort and the Beeson-Hammond Act. I do think it's worth saying that our courts have changed, and you can certainly, when you look at some of the things that were scaled back, that were overruled by the federal courts, I do think some of that's worth looking at again, because nobody can deny we have a different Supreme Court than we had then, and our federal judiciary has changed since some of those rulings, and so we need to look at what the court rulings were specifically, but also realize our judicial system's changed a little bit in its makeup.
Sure. So, okay, well, that's interesting. So you think revisiting some of that might be on the table? Yeah, certainly want to talk about that more. I know you're not put pen to paper yet on actual legislation, but how soon do you think y'all might be? Because session's about 5 months away, so you get plenty of time. But are y'all talking with LS, the Legislative Services Agency, and others about what might come about from these proposals?
I think you're seeing cooperation between the House members and the Senate members and LSA. We've had dialogue with our House members. They're working on it, and I think what we've accomplished today is talking to them. Let's all do it together and do it as one and try to figure it out and do it the right way and be successful at what we do.
Interesting. Well, look, this is something to really follow. I appreciate y'all coming on and explaining some of this. Of course, we're going to show some of the pictures and everything from y'all's border trip. But please follow up with us as you develop these proposals, because I think it's going to be a really interesting session focused on things like crime, and this is somewhat related to that. So, please keep us informed as you go forward. And thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Recently, the Alabama League of Municipalities launched its Live Locally Alabama campaign. Here's a short clip.
Where does Alabama start? Is it in the bayou or along the sandy white shorelines, amid seafood and shipbuilders? Or maybe high up in Cheaha State Park, where the sun creeps through the trees? Maybe it's a sound, like the revving of engines, or a perfect drive on a perfect day. It could be in the rhythm of Muscle Shoals and generations of music history that feel close enough to touch. History, that could be a good place to start. After all, the stories that were written here still echo across the country. And the future? Well, we know a thing or two about reaching for the stars. Our world-class research institutions will help us get there, while our rapidly growing automotive industry is hard at work building a more fuel-efficient tomorrow. And when they aren't, well, you can feel that in the electricity of a Friday night or the thunder of a Saturday afternoon. No matter where you begin, it all starts locally. The heart of Alabama is in the shop down the street or in the restaurant next door. It's in the atmosphere at the local market and in the joy of a favorite pastime. It's in the first responders watching out for all of it and all of us. It's even in the streets we use to drive to the parks and festivals we love. What makes it possible? Local government, a public service that keeps our environment clean, our cities growing, and our history and culture alive. But it doesn't work without us, all of us. So, where does Alabama start? It starts with you, locally.
And joining me next to talk about it are Dothan Mayor Mark Saliba and Fairhope Mayor Sherry Sullivan. Mayors, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
I should also mention that you are respectfully president and vice president of the Alabama League of Municipalities currently. So tell me about this campaign, Live Locally Alabama. Where did it come from? What's behind it? I'll start with you, I guess, as president.
Well, thank you. And we're extremely excited about this campaign, mainly because we think it will help our not only our citizens, but our state legislators and others as well to understand and see the needs and that we have in local government and where we spend our money and how that's used each and every day. And so we're excited about this video campaign.
Absolutely. Well, I saw some images from all around the state, so it's not just your beautiful coast and everything like that, but I'm sure every city has something to share in terms of why local government, why local participation is so important.
And I think that's what we try to educate everybody on, is the fact that every community is unique. Everybody has quality of life projects they're working on, things that really impact their citizens, the people who visit their communities. And again, this gives us another opportunity just to educate people about those quality of life services that we offer, public safety, sanitation, all those kind of things that cost money for our cities, and really want to help people understand the impact local government can have on our communities.
Oh, absolutely. And I just remember from, past lives, everybody gets so worked up about what happens in Washington, right? Probably because a lot of cable news, it's just kind of entertainment. So everybody gets worked up about Congress, what's happening in the White House, even here in the state sometimes. But I always say what happens, here in the State House, but especially at the local level, really is going to impact your life more than what happens in Washington, just on a day-to-day basis. Do y'all try to preach that to your citizenry as well?
I think, especially in Fairhope, we really do. I mean, we are the ones that hear from the residents when their garbage isn't picked up, when they want more ballparks, more pickleball courts, those kind of things. So, again, I do think local government is the best government. And obviously, we have to work together with our state and federal elected officials to make sure that we're all working together for the betterment of Alabama and for our communities. But again, I mean, we do touch folks every day. I mean, I think about our sanitation crews who touch our residents 4 times a week, or our police officers, our SRO officers who are in the schools. So again, I personally believe that local government is the best government.
And the most important sometimes, right?
Well, and as well, the fact that we are not really partisan in most of our towns and our cities. It is about providing basic services for all of our citizens, as Mayor Sullivan so eloquently described. And so, yes, every day we see families and friends in all of our cities. And so what happens in Montgomery does trickle down and affect us in a large way. But we really want our citizens to know just how local our government feels, that we are the boots on the ground in our cities and towns.
Mm-hmm. I was having a conversation with Stephen Boyd in Washington, talking about everybody traveling to Washington. I know y'all been plenty of times to communicate what's happening. He made an interesting comment about his time on the Hill, saying, we can't solve problems we don't know about. So please come and tell us what's going on. Would that be the same in terms of at the local level, hearing from citizens, whether it's at the city council meeting or coming to participate in some town hall about, we don't know your problems unless you tell us.
Absolutely. And I think because we are local, we do hear that a lot better than maybe in a larger scale. We see all of our people in grocery stores or at church or at schools, and so we get to interact with them face to face. We hear all the issues and the problems and the challenges that they have in everyday life.
Mm-hmm. How would you say the engagement level is right now amongst the citizenry in Fairhope and Dothan, just as an example?
In Fairhope, we have a very engaged community. I mean, it's, a lot of places I think you go, you don't see many people at council meetings. We tend to have a really good crowd at our council meetings. They tend to make their voice heard, which is great. Just like you said, I mean, we can't fix problems that we don't know about. Also, I do think, just like Mayor Saliba said, you are accountable to those folks. And I think that's why local government is so important, because you are running into them in the grocery store and at church, and they're your neighbors. So you get to communicate a whole lot more. And so them continuing to make you aware of the issues that they're having. And again, in Fairhope, we have a very engaged community, which is great.
Mm-hmm. What would you say about Dothan?
We have an engaged community as well. And I think the challenge, it used to be when my father was mayor in the 90s, most people went to either the newspaper or the TV. Mm-hmm. But now there's so many different avenues of information that's coming out there. So the challenge really is what is really great information and accurate information, what's misinformation or disinformation, and what's really more on a national level or a federal level, and not really something that Mayor Sullivan or any of our mayors or commissioners can really deal with on that level.
Right. Well, I wanted to ask you about that, because I know it must be a challenge really for all elected officials, but especially at the local level these days, because you do deal with misinformation. I'm thinking about this Haitian migrant thing that I think just about every city council or county commission is dealing with, based on some maybe not exactly accurate information, and yet they come to the city council about it, they come to the mayor's office about it. How big is that challenge, and is it helpful for y'all to have, to point people towards accurate information? Hey, here's the facts from the city or from the county or whatever it is. Is that a challenge that cities face?
I mean, for us, it has been a challenge, especially this week. I mean, as you know, we had a large council meeting on Monday night in regards to Haitian immigrants coming to Fairhope or to Baldwin County, and just being able to dispel the rumors, because there was no credible source for that information. And obviously, it's a federal issue; it's not a local issue. So, just helping people understand that is, something they need to deal with at the federal government. It's not something we can deal with locally, but also letting them know that we're working together with our, county, state, federal officials to make sure that our voice is heard, and that they know that that's not something that we're prepared for in Baldwin County or in Fairhope at this time. But again, it's a federal issue, and helping people just kind of figure out, navigate the misinformation and dispel the rumors.
Mm-hmm. And I think most of the time, it's some of the misinformation. It really speaks to some fears that people have, and rightfully so. They don't know for sure what to believe, or it was just like during COVID and the pandemic. You really weren't sure what was going on, and trying to figure out what is accurate and good information, and really just alleviating their fears, because no information or misinformation or disinformation, it makes people nervous, and rightfully so, and that's how we need to engage with them and make sure they do understand what the issue is.
Right. I agree with you because, there can be some truth to things and it kind of gets blown out of proportion based on your fears, right? Because there can be some legit concerns
Absolutely.
about local resources and things like that, but, can kind of get, go awry as we've seen. Talk about how important, you mentioned, this, you're working with the federal government, the state government. I know y'all both engage with our lawmakers here in Montgomery, see you in the State House quite a bit, also up in D.C. with our federal delegation. Talk about how important it is for you and your fellow mayors in the league to be engaged here in Montgomery, to be engaged in D.C., and to all be working together when those problems that have multiple layers come up.
I think specifically the campaign with the Alabama League, the Live Locally, is again something that we can use to educate those legislators, just to let them know how important local government is and the things that we're doing at home and how important that is. We continue to build those relationships with our elected officials, whether it's state or federal, and I think that's really important to keep those lines of communication open so you can educate them about issues that you're having locally and also learn from them about the issues at the state or federal level.
Mm-hmm. And we got a great delegation. Most of us in the state delegations are doing an excellent job, and our federal delegation as well. And but it's a long way from being here than it is on the ground in Dothan. Just knowing the needs, it takes a lot of revenue to take care of infrastructure just alone. The cost of roads continues to go up. The buildings, maintenance of that, or running a police department, running a fire department, making sure that someone can have the appropriate response times. Those things never stop, and they're always continuing to get higher, not smaller and lower. Mm-hmm. And so making sure that our legislators know, again, what it takes for us dollar-wise to really make sure that they can take care of water needs, sewer needs, the electricity and all that. We got a storm coming our way shortly. And,
that's right.
And how do you respond to that? You have to have those revenues and be ready to be able to act and take care of our citizens.
Yep. Mayor, I remember riding around with you, I guess it was when Michael came through, because the governor came down. I was kind of shadowing her for the day, and man, that was a real blessing that everybody made it out of that hurricane. But talk about the state and local and feds working together after a storm like that. I know you both deal with trying to reason with hurricane season. Switching gears, I wanted to ask you about this. It's the 30th anniversary, the League of Municipalities Certified Municipal Officers program. And I've just found this fascinating over the years about how the league, takes in not just mayors, not just, not city councilmen, but, folks that work in city government to really go through a program of certification, making them absolutely trained for the jobs, the various challenges that face cities. 30th anniversary of it, pretty big milestone. Can you talk about that a little bit? Yeah, the Certified Municipal Officials Program is awesome in the fact that, so the 2 terms that I have run, there have been people that really just weren't sure what their jobs were going to be, what that really entailed. They would come with maybe what they thought was what they wanted to get done. And really the basics of municipal government is really what we're all about. And so the program really speaks to that. It brings in people that can talk about and share experiences that they've had. But what's really great, I think, is that it helps us to continue to stay atop of any new issues that are coming along. And so it is the 30th year. We're the second oldest program in the country, which is awesome. By the way, we're going to be 90 years old next year as well. So the league in itself is going to be 90. Yeah. So this is a really strong organization, and any strong organization needs to make sure that everybody's up on the issues of the day. And this is a great way for us to do that. And I'm so proud of our staff and our league for doing that. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you've had folks taking advantage of the program as well. I have, and being a newly elected, mayor, Mayor Saliba kind of has been there for a little while, but not myself. So I think the league, I've really gained a lot of knowledge from them and the training programs that they have, but also just the relationships that you build. All these training programs allow you to learn from other mayors or elected officials who've been there longer than you have, and I think that's really important, is just building those relationships again. But again, the training program has been invaluable to me. I mean, just knowing your role, kind of getting that division between the council and the mayor, and being able to ask questions of folks, I think it's a great program. Well, yeah, you put your name on the ballot, you get elected, and what now? So it's nice to have a whole group, 100 strong that has that support and the great staff at ALM. Well, we're out of time, but thanks to y'all for coming in and explaining some of these issues. Look forward to having you back. Thank you so much. Thank you. We appreciate it. We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page.
As the longtime coach of the University of Alabama Crimson Tide, Coach Paul Bryant led the team to 6 national championships, 24 bowl games, 13 conference titles, and 3 undefeated seasons. He is widely considered the greatest college football coach of all time. Hello, I'm John Croyle, defensive end on the 1973 national championship team that went 11-0 regular season. In his 25 years at Alabama, Coach Bryant's teams compiled 232 wins, 46 losses, and participated in 24 consecutive bowl games. He was National Coach of the Year 3 times. His players received 67 All-American honors, and numerous Tide players went on to distinguished NFL careers. Coach Bryant remains an integral part of the Alabama football tradition. He established a scholarship fund for the children of former players to attend the university, and to this day, Tide fans wear houndstooth in his memory.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week with more Capital Journal at the same time, right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capital Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.